Hi everyone, I'm George Farrar and welcome to JAX 80, Jacksonville as it was in the year 1980. I'm pleased to bring you this series of shows taking a look at Jacksonville history from the years 1975 through to the year 1995. This is the sixth show in our JAX series, JAX 80. We're going to take a look at 1980. But first, before we do that, let's talk about time and how, like the roads of Jacksonville, time branches off. Before we branch off into the 80s, I do want to take a look at Jacksonville as it was in the 70s for one last time, because really to see where we're going in the 1980s, it does help to look at what was going on in the 1970s. And let's take a look at some different pictures. This is old Jacksonville Terminal, old Union Terminal. 1970s are changing times for Jacksonville. In January 1974, passenger rail service that has been serving Jacksonville at Jacksonville Terminal, Union Station, has been serving it there since 1919, is going to be moved to the Amtrak station on Clifford Lane, and Jacksonville Terminal is going to become abandoned. These are changing times for the city. Here we see Jacksonville Terminal in the early 1970s. We see the Independent Life building springing to life. Here we see downtown Jacksonville. In the mid-1970s, we see the old Sears store. Even in Hemming Park, there were changes. There was a construction project that got rid of the grass. They got rid of a lot of the palm trees, the bandstand, and they put in fountains and brick. And Florida Junior College constructed a downtown campus. So a lot of things going on, but then again, we look at Annie Lytle School, Old Public School 4, it was on the market, waiting for a buyer. Downtown at Main Street and Adams Street, Cress, the Five and Dime department store, they closed. These were challenging times for Jacksonville, challenging times for the people, and here we see those ubiquitous toll booths. People would have to pay cash and coin just to get around. Here, Main Street Bridge, at least it was free. But you see construction. You see these changing times. You see downtown you see a lot of the historic buildings. You see the buildings from the 60s, and you see where things are going to start to change. And here we have Mayor Godbold. He was trying to bring the cults, the Indianapolis cults, he tried to bring them to Jacksonville. It was a big effort among a lot of people in the city of Jacksonville to try to bring the cults, an NFL team, to be an NFL football team in Jacksonville at the Gator Bowl. And so Bob Irsay, the owner of the cults, landed, and people throughout Jacksonville gathered at the Gator Bowl to say, hey, we've got cult fever. Okay, so there was this first initiative in 1979, the first real big initiative, put Jacksonville on the map, it seemed like, at least in the landscape for NFL teams. This will be a struggle and it will be a challenge for leaders of the city. Though this effort to get the cults was not successful, there would be numerous attempts throughout the 1980s and into the early 1990s for Jacksonville to get an NFL football team. And that story has a happy ending, but we're in JAX 80. Okay, we're wrapping up the 70s. They say that life is a journey, not a destination. And so in these shows, I'm going to do the best that I can to tell you a little bit about my journey growing up in Jacksonville. And it's really interesting because some of the first things that I remember are some of the more basic things, like my father's work. Okay, in the mid 1970s, some point in the 1970s, he became a broadcast engineer, and he worked at Channel 17. He worked at Channel 12. Ultimately, he would work at Channel 4. So he worked at the television stations. And in 1979, precisely on Tuesday, February 27th, 1979, he had the opportunity, as part of the Channel 12 Action News crew, the opportunity to go out and to help to bring the signal to the television for viewers all over Jacksonville to see this historic event. A fire destroyed the Flagler Depot in 1979, which was next to Old Jacksonville Terminal, which was abandoned by that point. Paint was being stored for some reason in this old depot, which was originally constructed in the 1890s. Okay, so it went up, and so if you look at the archway that we know of today, you see that there was not much left. Okay, there was not much left after the fire was done with it, and it was a very sad affair because people were trying at the time to revitalize in that area. The revitalization of the area was delayed. And though we look at these pictures now of an event in February 1979, I'm going to have some great pictures to bring you later on in the 1980s when there are some renovations done to Old Jacksonville Terminal and the Prime Osborne Convention Center comes into being. Okay, but so there are these times, these things that happen. I'm not going to leave the 1970s on a dark note because great things are happening on the west side of Jacksonville. Back in the mid-1960s, the Florida Junior College at Jacksonville was created. We know it now as Florida State College. I knew it as Florida Community College at Jacksonville, FCCJ, and people even older than I am can remember FJC, Florida Junior College. And they started out with the initiative to provide education to people and to get people ready for work, to bring people in to education that had not necessarily had the opportunities before in different ways. And so that was a big thing. The 1960s and the 1970s were changing times. Women were coming into the workforce. Women were wanting to get educated. Some people were coming out from the military back into the civilian workforce. And so there was this naval housing out at Park Street and Roosevelt Boulevard. And all these old naval housing, these houses. And eventually the Navy handed them over, and ultimately the Florida Junior College at Cumberland campus was born, where we now have Kent campus today. And as you can see, the campus certainly was a lot different back then. Okay, so it was time in the 1970s for for Florida Junior College to grow, not only on the west side, but also over on the south side at South Campus. So by December 1979, it was time for Florida Junior College to leap into the 1980s with Kent Campus. And in 1993, I would have the privilege to attend Florida Community College at Jacksonville at Kent Campus and enjoy the beautiful campus that opened in December 1979. But back in 1980, I was just 5 years old. And I'll tell you more about things down the road. So Jacksonville emerges into the 1980s. Here we see the movie Caddyshack is playing at the Five Points Theater in Riverside. I really enjoyed Caddyshack, watching it growing up. on video. Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd, great hijinks on the golf course. Lots of fun. Now, speaking of hijinks and fun, back in 1979, a jazz festival was happening in the small fishing village of Mayport. By 1980, it really grew into its own. Lots of people, lots of jazz. Now, I remember at some point in the early 1980s, I don't know if it was in 80, 81, or 82, but at some point, I went up to Mayport and with my family, and there was a lot of loud music. I remember the music being incredibly loud. Okay, I didn't have musical discernment in some respects for his concert music at that young an age, but I remember lots of food, lots of people, lots of loud music. And here we see Dizzy Gillespie was there, Della Reese, and this was a big opportunity for people to hear jazz music, and this was the beginning of what we later would know as the Jacksonville Jazz Festival. The people of Jacksonville were enjoying this music festival. Here I am trying to make some music of my own. I would spend 2 years in preschool at Southside Estates, and this was a formative time for me because I had some deep challenges. Not only was I really trying to get used to wearing glasses, but also I had been diagnosed as borderline retarded. So I was living, of course, with my father, Terry Farrar, and my stepmother, Pat, in Arlington. Here I am in 1980 with my stepmother in front of her parents' house. We ultimately would move to Mandarin later on in the 1980s. Now, one time, long ago, my father and I were in the car and we were listening to an Elton John song. He and I really enjoyed Elton John, and he said there were the opening lines of this Elton John song, and he described it as like I was when I was 5. And the lyrics are, "I was justified when I was 5, raising Cain, I spit in your eye." I would have quite a temper, and I really was trying to get out and about and see the world, and I wanted to do things my way no matter what my parents wanted. So I would, every once in a while, I would run into some trouble. But back long ago, there was, and we still see today, the old dinosaur out on Beach Blvd. Now, there was a Goonie Golf back in the 1970s on Beach Blvd, and so the dinosaur was there. This is another earliest memory. I remember seeing it back when there was the Goonie Golf. I went out there with my mother, Martha, and one of her boyfriends. Okay, so this was a time of a lot of challenge, but I always tried, when I could, to have the fun that was out there. The big places in Arlington to have fun was right off Atlantic Blvd, catty corner with Regency Square Mall, Showbiz Pizza. Really enjoyed Showbiz Pizza. By this point, my father Terry was working for Channel 4, and they would have Christmas parties for the kids at Showbiz Pizza. And the way it worked was you would go in and, you would be able to eat pizza and check out the arcade. I started out a lifelong love of skee ball at Showbiz Pizza. But not only that, would you have the opportunity to run around, and, the way the arcades worked with me was just get as many tokens as I could get and just jump in every single, because sometimes they'd have these car games, and they would have, the actual stand up and punch and, take out the invaders and all of that through hand controls and looking into the monitors and stuff. So you would just get all these tokens, and you would try to go to each and every machine you could go to, and my length at the machine would be as long as it would take for me to finally try to figure it out, if I could. If not, I moved on to the next machine. And some machines I really liked, some games I really liked, some not as much. So if you can imagine a whole bunch of kids running around, it was quite an affair. Now, here you can see they had these different rooms with different electronically moved robotic type singing characters. So it was something that was of its time, and I really enjoyed it. A lot of good quality family time, food, and fun at Showbiz. During the summer of 1980, things were heating up, but not just on Jacksonville Beach. Presidential election politics were coming to Jacksonville. The United States of America was having a presidential election campaign, and so we were going to have some visitors. The people running for president were coming to Jacksonville. In this picture, we see Jacksonville International Airport in July 1980. On the left, you see what was Air Force One at that time. And over on the right, you see a Pan Am jet. President Jimmy Carter was coming to Jacksonville in July 1980, running for re-election. So he landed here at Jacksonville International Airport, and he had something to say to Mayor Godbold and the people that gathered to hear him speak on July 17th, 1980. I'm very proud of Jacksonville. I'm very proud of Florida. You've always been friends of mine. The first time I ever left Georgia to go into a foreign state, it was to go to Jacksonville and Jacksonville Beach. I did it every year, and it let me see what the outside world was like, and I liked what I saw. And I would guess when I was 8 or 10 years old, if I hadn't come down here to see how you lived, I might have been satisfied and still been plowing with a mule in Sumter County, Georgia, growing peanuts. So I thank you for broadening my perspective. These were challenging times for America at home and abroad. One of the first major national news events I remember was the Iranian hostage crisis. Seeing the hostages on television, seeing the Ayatollah, and seeing the crisis that was happening as people were trying to get the hostages back home. And I remember the yellow ribbons. So I remember these times well. Also in 1980, Jacksonville welcomed former California governor and presidential candidate Ronald Reagan. Here he is in Hemming Plaza. Behind him is the Woolworth and JCPenney building. He is campaigning for president, and times are about to change in Jacksonville and in the United States. When the election was held, the presidential election was held in November 1980. Ronald Reagan was elected our 40th president, and Duval County gave him a majority. Florida gave him a majority. So he won. He was elected president. He defeated President Carter, so he would take office on January 20th, 1981. A lot of change was coming in the 1980s for the United States and Jacksonville. So as we fly through some pictures from 1980, here we see the First Presbyterian Church, the 1980 Gator Bowl, and we'll take a brief look at Jacksonville International Airport. There's a little map of it and an Eastern Airlines timetable. So we're kind of going back in time, but while we do this, I want to invite you to please check out our shows, our History Jacksonville shows on the JAX Left channel. I have a lot to bring you ahead this spring and early summer. I'll be taking a look at our Main Street Bridge. I'll be heading to the south side. That's coming up next on History Jacksonville. I'll be heading to the north side. I'll be taking a look at Imeson Airport, Old Imeson Airport, and Jacksonville International Airport. So there's a lot ahead. So as we take one last look at 1980, I decided to put up this picture of legendary boxer Muhammad Ali at the old Jacksonville City Hall on the river, shaking hands with Mayor Godbold. He was campaigning for President Jimmy Carter's re-election. So here we have this moment. We have this moment, a fun moment with Mayor Godbold and Muhammad Ali in this political year, this pivotal year of 1980. It was a pivotal year not only for Jacksonville and for the country, but it was definitely a pivotal year in my life where I got a chance to really start to get out in the world and to start to understand things. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please share it. Tell me what you think. The best is yet to come on the JAX Left channel. All of our shows are at theleftturnetwork.com. Take it easy. See you later.